Hello, Tom 3PO here, and welcome back to another exciting adventure of Tier Maker. And in today's video, we're going to be making a tier list of the Friday the 13th franchise films. I happened to watch Friday the 13th Part 5, 6, and 7 last night accidentally on Hulu, and it got me pumped, motivated, ready to make this tier list. It's been long overdue. I know I've talked about making it before, but there's just been so much going on, it kind of fell to the wayside. But that ends today. So I've got the list over here of different ranks: best of the best, rewatchable, mediocre, skippable, and last but not least, why? 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 So I love Friday the 13th. It's probably one of my favorite franchises. As a kid, I grew up watching Halloween and Child's Play, then Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th was always that kind of like adult esque type of horror movie. Um, there's always, well, I shouldn't say always, but more often than not, you're going to find some nudity, some women's breasts, if you will. So that was never really a movie that I wanted to try to watch, renting from the video store. Halloween was safe. Well, you know what? There was a little bit of nudity in Halloween 1 and Halloween 2, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. No nudity in Halloween 3 or 4. I don't believe there was. I don't know if there was any nudity in the barn scene in Halloween 5. There might have been. I can't remember off the top of my head that specifically. Halloween 6, I believe there was. And I think after that, like the nudity kind of fell off. That whole trope of having a slasher movie with gratuitous upper nude shots kind of fell to the wayside a little bit. But yeah, Friday the 13th was one of those films where I would see it on TV. And of course, it's edited, but I would always catch like the tail end of it. Never knew that all the movies were kind of connected until I got a little older and then I started to watch them in order. And hot damn, I was blown away at how canonically accurate they were. At least the first five or six of them. Well, actually, you know what? We'll get into that here. Well, I'll talk about that a little bit more once we get to the tier. So I'm going to start with why. That's going to be Jason Goes to Hell. Why? Well, why? Even as an adult, I don't really understand how much of a tonal shift with both like the story involved. It's just it's mind-blowing. If you're not familiar with Friday the 13th, Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, it takes literally everything else in the story so far and just throws it out the window. And it's like, hey, all the lore and everything that we kind of built up over the last like 7 or 8 sequels? Yeah, no, forget about it. What you know is a lie. No, we're going to tell you a little bit more of a backstory with Jason Voorhees and the family. I guess there's like the Necronomicon at the end, vaguely shown for like a split second. Something about a dagger and Jason's heart. It's bananas, and it's really unfortunate because the franchise up to that point was kind of on a decline. Um, and that just kind of sealed it. Jason X is the next one that I would list. I'm going to do skippable. Same premise, I guess. Like everything we thought we knew about Jason is kind of a lie. I guess they try to explain that he's basically uh, not a mutant in a sense, but he's got extreme healing capabilities. Like he just cannot die. And the whole space slasher, like once you got a movie that, is in space, it's not good. I remember Leprechaun in the day. It was like Leprechaun, Leprechaun 2, Leprechaun 3, and then boom, Leprechaun in space. And that was That Leprechaun series is a fun watch. If you've ever seen the Leprechaun movies, you might know what I'm talking about. If you have not watched any of the Leprechaun horror movies, I suggest at least checking them out. You know, if you can find them streaming somewhere, perfect. If you want to rent them for a few dollars, I would almost say at least the first one, you'll get a real taste for what's to come. The rest of them are just as campy, kind of similar in story structure, but oh man, Warwick Davis was so good as the Leprechaun, and it's very underrated, I think. You know, because growing up, it was always Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Chucky, and then who was oh, Scream. There was Ghostface, maybe even Pinhead, but like Leprechaun never got a whole lot of love, so I definitely recommend that. But anyways, back to Jason X. I would say that's skippable. If I watched Friday the 13th 1 through Jason Goes to Hell, I would be okay. I wouldn't need to watch Jason X. There was a setup for a sequel at the end of it, never paid off, and I think Freddy versus Jason came out after that, like a couple years or maybe even longer. I don't know. I remember back when Freddy versus Jason was hinted at after Jason Goes to Hell, and like 10 years went by, nothing, and never heard anything of it. And then when it finally did come out, I'm going to do this. Skippable. I'm going to say skippable. I never really got into Nightmare on Elm Street. It was, for me, it was super scary, but like not in like a fun way. Um, and that's like, you know, I remember seeing costumes and everything, and I don't think it was ever really, and I'm going into territory here where I'm not really the most knowledgeable at. I'll admit that, because A Nightmare on Elm Street was never really a franchise that I got into with like the lore and everything. But I always was told that like Freddy was a predator, like he touched children, and the parents of Springfield or whatever, Springwood, whatever the town's name was, basically did a vigilante Death Wish style and burnt him up and like killed him. And then he came back looking for revenge on those parents' kids or something like that. So like it was always weird to see like Freddy Krueger costumes. It's like, you want to dress up as a kid diddler? You know, I get it. You know, like the knives, it's very scary, and like I think they like kind of moved away from that background with Freddy Krueger. Didn't really touch on it as much. I could be wrong. I that's just my perception, and you know, perfect time to bring up a disclaimer. These are all just my opinions. I don't know too much about Nightmare on Elm Street. That's just that's the best of my ability that I know of with Freddy Krueger. I did like A New Nightmare. That was pretty good. And then I watched Dylan's New Nightmare, and that was pretty good as well. But like A Nightmare on Elm Street 1, 2, Dream Warrior 3, 4, whatever they are, never. I mean, I watched them. Don't get me wrong, but I never got into them, if that makes sense, like I did with Friday the 13th or Halloween or Child's Play. But Freddy versus Jason, to me, when I watched it, Jason seemed too clean. I don't know. The whole story was kind of weird, and I didn't really care for it. I just thought it was, you know, just another offshoot of a chapter with Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. Didn't really care for it. Next up, we've got the remake of Friday the 13th. You know, rewatchable. I'm gonna put that in rewatchable. I liked it. I definitely liked how they were able to weave like the beginning with Pamela Voorhees and Jason witnessing the attack on her, and then like I think they kind of melded the first couple movies without him in the mask and just went straight to Baghead, and then he found the mask, and I thought that was pretty neat how they did all that, because I wasn't sure when the movie came out, like, how does he get the mask? Is it going to be something similar to how he got it in Friday 3? Are we going to get Baghead Jason? And then, of course, the trailer came out, and you seen him with the Baghead on, and then you seen him with the mask. So there was so many questions, and I believe the internet was still like kind of in the early days, so it wasn't really easy to find these things out through legitimate sources. I mean, there was always a bunch of hearsay, but I liked it. Yeah, I definitely wish that there wasn't the lawsuits involved with making a sequel and the whole rights and everything with the Cunningham trial and whatnot. But definitely looking forward to see if they do make a sequel. I think it's going to be good. I'm excited for it. All right. Friday the 13th, part 1. Boom. I'm going to put that as best of the best. I really enjoyed the whodunit aspect of Friday the 13th. Sure, they might not have been the first to do it. And I wouldn't even argue that they did it well. I mean, there's a lot of loopholes and plot holes near the end, but for what it was, I mean, it was so simple, just like Halloween. Like, you just had this cast of counselors, a bunch of shenanigans going on, good fun, hijinks of the sort, and then shit starts to get real in one night. And one by one, they're picked off. Kevin Bacon. Need I say more? Oh, no. But yeah, no, I thought it was really, really good. And the twist at the end, I'd have to go back and watch it, but I've got a conspiracy with Friday the 13th. I want to say, and this is just all like one shot, there's no script. I'm just thinking of things and I say them. Maybe a little editing when it comes to uploading the video, taking out some parts, cleaning it up. But Jason is my son and today is his birthday, or Jason was my son and today was his birthday. I don't remember how she worded it, but if she said it in past tense, then, Jason being dead and whatnot, that would make sense. But there was a scene at the end where the main final girl is hiding in the cabin, and the body of one of the other counselors gets thrown through a window. And shortly after that, you see the headlights from Pamela Voorhees' Jeep pulling up. And I always thought, man, how did she throw the body through the window and then run back to the van or the Jeep and then pull up so fast? And then I thought, well, what if Jason was alive and he was helping his mom? That would make so much sense. What better than to have an accomplice in the shadows, which would explain the sequels, because he saw the mom getting killed and was like, holy shit, I gotta not only take revenge of her death, but I've gotta avenge the camp or something. I don't know. Wild tangent. I'm still in the middle of my coffee, so bear with me. But yeah, really loved Friday the 13th. Part 2, I'm going to put it with best of the best as well. And I really liked how they were able to introduce Jason, 5 or so years later. And then you get a new cast of camp counselors that come out. And I would argue they are more memorable than their predecessors. You had Jenny and Paul. I don't remember the other ones' names. I know we went over this with the women of Friday the 13th, but I cannot for the life of me remember their names. But yeah, I really liked this cast of counselors in part 2 better than the counselors in part 1. They had a lot more fun with it, I would argue. The cast was a little bit more diverse in the fact that you had a more cliched variety of counselors. You've got the hot girl, the preppy guy, the kind of stoners, the burnouts, if you will, and then you had the love lust, the, like, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for, the starstruck, I don't know, but you had like the hopelessly romantic woman lusting after the gentleman in the wheelchair, and just and the nerdy guy who actually lived because he stayed at the bar with his beer goggles and But yeah, really memorable cast. I really like Jason in this one, and I'll be honest with you, Jason that can run, way more terrifying than the undead Jason in the later sequels. When and we'll get to that in the final chapter, but I really liked part two. I liked it a lot, and then the way they set it up with um, the little dream sequence at the end, in Paul, like what happened to Paul? Like, did he die? Did he live? What the hell happened? I don't know. We'll never find out, I guess. Friday the 13th, part three. Boom, best of the best. I enjoyed this one also tremendously. Little shaky in the story regarding the main final girl's history with Jason, but loved Shelley, loved the stoners in this one as well, who I think also appeared in the Friday the 13th game. And then, man, one thing that always made me wonder, one of the characters in this one, I forget her name, but it's hinted at that she's pregnant. I think it's more than hinted at. I'm pretty sure she even says, hey, no, I'm pregnant. And she ends up dying. So if that is true and she wasn't just unsure, then that would be the first time Jason has technically killed a woman and a child. Uh, I'm not going to get into the politics of what constitutes a child. I'm just saying, like, if she was pregnant, then that'd be a first. I'm not trying to get all political in here, but this is where Jason gets his iconic hockey mask. And man, there was a really sad part where after Shelley gets killed, his date finds his wallet in the water, and she's like looking at it, and it was just so heartwarming because, like, for a glimpse right there, you could see maybe she's falling for it. Maybe that was enough to tug at her heartstrings and be like, you know what, he's a good guy. I probably should have gave him a chance. I shouldn't have been so hard on him and quick to judge. And then she dies. So yeah, a lot going on there. And then the end, oh man, yeah, the biker gang in this one with Foxy, I think her name was, and then I forget the other two guys' names, but one of them comes out of nowhere at the end and tries to save, well, maybe not trying to save, but maybe just trying to kill Jason. He ends up eating the dirt really quick, but it saves, what is her name, Chrissy? We're going to go with Chrissy. I don't know if that's actually the final girl in Friday the 13th 3's name, but we're going to go with Chrissy. That gives Chrissy enough time to grab that axe, boom, knock him, and yeah, can't be alive. You can't be. And sure enough, he's not. Until the final chapter. Boom. Also, best of the best. Hands down, the final chapter. We are picking up right where part 3 left off, which, by the way, Friday the 13th part 3 picks up right after the events of number 2. So, like, aside from the year or two gap or whatever between Friday the 13th and Friday the 13th part 2, these three movies actually take place around like the same day, like the same week at least. Awesome storytelling right there. And the final chapter picks up at the end of Friday the 13th part 3. Jason's taken to a morgue. Chaos ensues. People die. He's not dead, and he's returning to the campgrounds. But along the way, he runs into the family of Tommy Jarvis and co. And then right next door, I guess there's like a party house with a bunch of horny teenagers, and hilarity ensues. Imaginary computers and stuff like that. Oh, good old Teddy. But yeah, this movie right here was always my personal favorite growing up, because I remember Corey Feldman, who played Tommy, from The Lost Boys, The Goonies. It was very relatable, and the fact that there was a little kid thrown in the mix, it reminded me a lot of Halloween 4, where at the time, Danielle Harris, I was around the same age as her, and watching her get chased by fucking Michael Myers was terrifying, because, okay, if he can go after a little kid, he can come after me. And the same was true with Friday the 13th, except I will argue that Jason Voorhees is way scarier than Michael Myers by one thing, the fact that he can run. The final girl, uh I forget what they even call that, the final girl circuit, the final girl lap, where Tommy's sister is being chased by Jason and she like is running through both the houses. Oh my gosh, so terrifying, because like he's decaying, he's has all this damage, and yet he's still able to like wind it and huff it and chase after her. It was so scary. And this is supposedly originally supposed to be the death of Jason Voorhees. They wanted to make sure like he would not come back. At least that's what I gather. I could be wrong. Once again, just my opinion. And sure enough, he does come back. But before we get to that one, yeah, these four movies right here, I don't even know where to begin, because compared to other horror movies, I don't know if Nightmare on Elm Street is canonically accurate or if they just kind of jump around. But compared to Halloween, because Child's Play, that is like the most canonically accurate. Hats off to Don Mancini, who's been just slaying it for the last like 2 or 3 decades. With Child's Play 1, 2, 3, Bride of Chucky, all that good stuff. But when it comes to like non-voodoo-esque killer dolls and just going straight into the slashers, between Halloween and Friday the 13th, I prefer Friday the 13th storyline simply because it's the most consistent with the first 4 films. Well, and actually technically the 5th one too, and if you want to get really into it, you can go with the other ones. But I like to think that these 4 films, hell, even these 3, it tells a beginning, middle, and end. You've got the beginning, either with Jason or all the way back with his mom. You got the middle part right here, and then you got the end. And, you know, Jason, at that point, at the end of the final chapter, he is, for all intents and purposes, dead. And they come out with part 5, and that is definitely rewatchable. For sure. I watched it. I intentionally put on part 5 last night and watched it. And it's so good. It's so good. I don't want to get off on too many tangents here because I want to finish talking about this, but let me just say that it's a guilty pleasure, but it's damn good. And I know back in the day, a lot of people were saying the same thing that they said about Halloween 3, where it didn't really have Jason, it was just a copycat, and they didn't like it. But uncultured swines. Dude, Demon, there's a character called Reckless. He's a little kid at the Crazy Bin, or the Looney House. Wait, Crazy House Looney Bin, son of a bitch. And he's got a brother that he goes to visit near the end of the movie. And oh man, he's my favorite character. Those two, Reckless and Demon, they are the best. Unfortunately, Demon dies, but I would have loved to have seen more of him for sure. Like, they could have had their own movie, and they could have been the main characters being chased by Jason, and that would have been, oh man, if only. Man, Friday the 13th needs to do like a what if, where we ask those questions and we get to see how it would have played out, because that would have been so damn good. But back to these right here. I like to think that these are canon alone. Like, everything else that happened after, like, once Jason becomes supernatural, that ends it for me. It's not as scary because, yeah, he's supernatural. He can teleport. He can be in multiple places at once, probably. He has superhuman speed, strength. He just can't be killed. And you got to really kind of bend your will of imagination to kind of believe that, okay, they can pull this off somehow or another. And while, I'm going to put it up here, rewatchable. I do like part 6 really, to the point where I would put it in best of the best. But, you know, for me personally, once they make that shift to the supernatural, this is my favorite Tommy aside from Corey Feldman's Tommy, Tom Williams, I think is his name, or something like that. And I watched Never Hike Alone 2, or no, wait, there was a fan made movie where he came back with a few other supporting actors from Part Six, and just did a phenomenal job. And kind of like Dylan's New Nightmare, kind of breathed a little bit of life back into a franchise that maybe people thought didn't deserve a second chance. And it just really shows what you can do with enough heart, motivation, and just passion. Because I really enjoyed both Dylan's New Nightmare and the fan film for the sequels to Jason Lives. I enjoyed them a lot. Really good work. But for me, when I'm looking at the story, sure, they could have done something off of this, of part five, but it's definitely rewatchable. I just prefer the beginning, middle, and end storyline of Jason Voorhees, and then everything else after. Um, eh, I wouldn't say a cop out, but like a cash grab, but it just felt like there was no real sense of urgency. There nothing was at stake. Like, yeah, he's basically immortal now. We gotta find a way to like incapacitate him for a few years until the next movie can come out. So, um, moving on, New Blood. That's rewatchable too. I really like that one. As a matter of fact, I think that's probably the scariest looking Jason. Because you can see his spine exposed in the back, and his mask is really decayed, and he's just so brutal in this one. Probably the most brutal out of all the Jasons in terms of his ferocity, his just crushing people's skulls and just being ruthless. I really liked how they had his counterpart as a a final girl who had telekinesis and could do stuff with her mind. Very interesting approach. That was also one of my favorites growing up, just because of everything that I just mentioned. Um, and then, yeah, the same kind of premise happens at the end where you basically just incapacitate them. She doesn't rip them apart and all that. She just sends them to the bottom of Crystal Lake. When a few years later, a boat filled with a couple of horny people drag their anchor over a power line or something and then bring Jason back. Part 7, Jason Takes Manhattan. Or, no, that's part 8, my bad. That's mediocre. This is definitely the wettest Jason Voorhees will ever be. Throughout the whole film, he just looks slimy and like he's always just stepping out of a shower, fully clothed and masked. The ending of this one, though, was really a head scratcher for me as a kid. Spoilers if you haven't seen it, which it's almost 40 years old. You probably should have seen it. After Jason gets bombarded with like the toxic waste in a tunnel, he's converted back to Tiny Jason that drowned in the 60s at Camp Crystal Lake. Didn't understand why that was a thing. Why? I mean, I really probably should put that under why, but I really did like Jason being out in the open. And sure, it wasn't shot in New York, but they wanted it to look like it. But seeing him out in like the city and walking amongst everyday people and being outside of that environment of in the woods at a camp, secluded from society, was really neat to see. And when he's walking through the diners and everything and the subway and on the streets, like people interact with them, and it's just so cool to see, like, they don't know what he is like us, the viewers, know. They just think he's a homicidal guy in a hockey mask. There were a select few of scamps and rapscallions that got to see him without the mask, and they just hightailed it out of there. But yeah, as far as Friday the 13th goes, this is definitely. I mean, I wouldn't turn it down. You know, like when I watched number 5 and 6 and 7 last night. Number 8 was the next one on the list, but it was almost midnight, and I was like, well, I'll probably just go to bed because I didn't really want to stay up till like 1 or 2. But I mean, I would watch it if it was on, but it's not something I'm gonna, like just go straight to. It's not like I'm ever gonna get a craving for Jason Takes Manhattan. And there is my list. The best of the best, the first 4, rewatchable. And I say rewatchable, I thought about putting classic, but the only problem is, like Friday the 13th, the remake, it's like not that old of a movie. So as far as classics go, I didn't want to put it in anything else. So I'm pretty satisfied with this list. I think it's definitely a good list. I think I was able to explain very well how my thought process is for the first 4 movies compared to the rest and why they are up there with best of the best. And you could argue Jason Lives could be right up there with best of the best, as well as number 5 and The New Blood. No arguments there. I'm not saying that they aren't the best of the best, but when I was making this in terms of story continuity, man, you know what? I mean, technically 5 could be up there. And yeah, I like that. I like that a lot better. Okay. Ah, man. See, I'm so torn because like Jason Lives is such a good movie, but for me, every time I think of it, I'm just like, this is like a popcorn fest. Like Jason can't die. So the whole supernatural thing, that's why it's on rewatchable. So yes, that is going to be my tier list for the Friday the 13th franchise. If you have not seen any of these movies that are up here, I would highly recommend even the why. Just check it out. Just check it out for yourself. Form your own opinion. I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but I'm not saying it's good. It might be your new favorite, just waiting to be watched. Who knows? Who knows? I could be wrong about this entire list when it comes to someone else, and that's the beauty of making this. My own opinions, my own take on the franchise and the story leading into each and every sequel that's on here. It's been a wild ride, and Friday the 13th is definitely one of my favorite franchises. I'm really sad about the game being scrapped and taken down. But I am hopeful now that there seems to be some progress being made with that developing, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre did really well as far as being a video game. I would love to see Friday the 13th come back in video game form. I played that so much, and when I look back on it, I played that game before I ever started making YouTube videos, but if that game was alive and healthy with the community and I was able to play it now, oh man, I would be playing that all the time. That was my favorite game. So I am hopeful in the future, but I'm not going to hold my breath. But if it does make a comeback and Friday the 13th, the game part 2 comes out or something like that, you better believe we're going to be seeing lots of gameplay of me back at Camp Crystal Lake with that, or Pinehurst, or wherever else the setting might take place. So yes, thank you very much for joining me and listening to me rant about something that I'm very passionate about. And I hope that you had fun and maybe even might have a couple movies to watch now as a result of this. But chances are, if you are watching this, you probably have seen these. But if you are uninitiated, I would highly check out the first 4. And then, if you like those and you want to continue on with the rest of the movies, go for it. You might like some of the ones that are, in my opinion, stinkers, and you might not like some of the ones that I think are the best, and that's perfectly fine. So with all that out of the way, this has been Tom 3PO. You take care.